Good morning to all the dignitaries and the participants present here virtually. A very hearty and warm welcome to each one of you to the national webinar on unspoken side of Dr. Ambedkar in women empowerment, organized by the Center for Women's Child Rights and Gender Justice of Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai. I welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Dilip Ukji, in his absentia, respected Registrar Sir, Professor Dr. Anil Varyat Sir, in his absentia, our esteemed chief guest for today's national webinar, Ms. Cynthia Stephen Ma'am, Coordinator of CWCRGJ, Assistant Professor Shraddha Gaikwad Ma'am, Joint Coordinator Shriya Mukta Ma'am, and I welcome you all to this national webinar. Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai is one of the premier law universities in India, which was established in the year 2014. The university disseminates advanced legal knowledge under the able guidance and the mentorship of university's Chancellor, Justice Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, who is the Honorable Judge, Supreme Court of India. We have established the Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice in MNLU Mumbai to promote research and academic collaboration to create an environment for gender just society, to collaboration with the government and non-governmental agencies by organizing programs and providing training for creating gender awareness among locals, marginalized and underprivileged societies, sections of society. We also provide free legal aid to the distressed women and the other gender minorities. Today, on the day of Ambedkar Jayanti, I have got the very valuable opportunity to express my views on the great man who has not only drafted the Constitution of India, but also showed the path of equality to the entire world. To quote the great man in his last speech to the Constituent Assembly of India, he said, "Bhakti in religion may be a road to the salvation of the soul, but in politics, Bhakti or hero worship is a sure road to degradation and to eventual dictatorship." Today, we're not here to idolize Dr. Ambedkar, not to defy him. I'm here to pay my tributes to the human being who taught the world equality. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is hailed by many names. He is known as the architect of the Indian Constitution, messiah of the downtrodden, intellectual giant among giants, eminent jurist, erudite scholar, Mahamanav, Baba Saheb, Kranti Surya, Bodhisattva, but not many are aware of his commitment to the women's cause and women empowerment. His determined contribution towards the cause of women's rights, the social movement of the 1920s and 30s, helped to shape India's modern feminist thought. Finally, turning to his immense contribution in the upliftment of Dalits and weaker sections of the society, his equal or more contribution prevails for giving equal rights to the women of all castes, which is on power with Mahatma Jyotibai Phule. His contribution is immense, and today we're all here to hear about our great leader. Before we start this webinar, I request Vedant Mayankar, convener of CWCRGJ, to pay a tribute to Dr. Ambedkar.
Thank you very much, Prerna, for your introduction. So, Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice, Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai, pay heartfelt tributes to Bharat Ratna Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on the occasion of his birth anniversary. Known as the father of Indian Constitution and India's first law minister, Dr. Ambedkar will always inspire us to dedicate our lives to work for equality and justice. As a mark of a small tribute to this great giant and an erudite scholar, a great intellectual, as Prerna described, I would like to present a small poem written by me, titled A Masiha. A body, they said, achut, had the purest soul in it, a heart pulsing that was for the society, an eye that was for visioning equality. It took him papers to burn, to touch the untouched water, for whipping from his path all the sort of disparity by taking up a march towards charity. Knowledge which he was endowed, as vast as and as deep as a sea, is still a feat untouchable for us, which we always be considered as magnum opus, the most sacred book he designed, all in one, one for all, giving all humans a just status without any distinction. A Masiha he was and he is, for his perennial thoughts and ideas, for this society, for this mankind. Can there be any other like him we can find? Thank you very much. With this small poem, I pay my tributes on behalf of the University and Center for Women, Child Rights and Gender Justice to this great human being on his birth anniversary. With this, I hand over the platform to Prerna Sanjay.
That was truly a brilliant start to the webinar. Now I request Assistant Professor Shraddha Gaikwad ma'am, the coordinator of CWCR-GJ, to give the welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Prerna. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
A very good morning to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Dilip Uke, Registrar Sir, Professor Dr. Anil Varyat, our chief guest for today, Ms. Cynthia Stephen, who is a Dalit, social activist, a journalist, and a writer, and my dear students, the members of the team, the center, I welcome you all. At the outset, I feel great pride in celebrating this occasion in the presence of Miss Cynthia Stephen. And we need more such people who would take forward the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar. My association with Ambedkarism has been very long, because my grandfather, he was very active in the Ambedkarite movement. And quite years later, I had the opportunity to teach in the Ambedkar International Research Center. And it was during this time that I encountered, and in a way, in the process of learning and reading about Dr. Ambedkar, I unfolded so many aspects of his work. I unfolded what a brilliant legend and a jurist he has been. And this I would also probably mention that Dr. Ambedkar probably has always been defined in his limits as a person who worked for the downtrodden, or the leader of the downtrodden, or the Dalits, or the principal, the architect of Indian Constitution. But I must say at the same time that he was an economist by training, a sociologist, an anthropologist, undoubtedly the first law minister in Nehru's court, a Bharat Ratna. And he embraced the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity, because of which I believe that we are here today, because of which I believe so many of us had the opportunity to be here, to be educated. Women did not have the right to equality, did not have the right to, in fact, were unaware of their rights, didn't have the right towards maintenance on divorce, didn't have the right to choose a marriageable partner after reaching a marriageable age. But it is due to the contribution of Dr. Ambedkar that we are here. And I welcome our guest speaker for today. And on that note, I wouldn't take a lot of time. I would hand over to Miss Cynthia Stephen. We look forward to hearing from her, especially the contribution of Dr. Ambedkar in the empowerment of women, which is something that is not often spoken about, right? So I think with that, I hand over to Miss Cynthia Stephen, where I would like to quote from Dr. Ambedkar that I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. Thank you. I pass over to Ms. Cynthia Stephen. Thank you so much.
Before we begin, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Ms. Cynthia Stephen ma'am. Cynthia Stephen ma'am is a social policy researcher, gender and development specialist, women's rights activist, and an independent journalist. She is native of Bangalore. She has written many articles and contributed chapters for books on issues of Dalit women, Brahminical patriarchy, caste discrimination, girl-child issues, womenism, and many more in national and international journals and reviews, including Journal of Dharma, Religion and Society, and Integral Liberation. She is the president of the Training, Editorial and Development Services Trust and lives in Bangalore, India. She has been inspired by the lives and examples of Jesus Christ, Pandita Ramabai, Savitribai Phule, Jyoti Rao Phule, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, among others. Ma'am was previously hosted by us on 8th March on International Women's Day, and she has been benevolent enough to join us once again today. And now, for one of the much anticipated section of the webinar, I would like to invite Ms. Cynthia Stephen to enlighten us with her noble thoughts. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Thank you so much for those gracious words. And thank you for inviting me to this webinar. This is one of my favorite things to address young people particularly, because as we go along life's journey, we need to lighten the path and share the vision with our younger generation. So, and that to those who are entering the field of law. So thank you so much for inviting me. I would like to, at this point, before I go into my presentation, remember with honor and respect the contributions of Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, the original Mahatma, Savitribai Phule, his beloved and brilliant wife, Ramabai Ambedkar, the woman behind the scenes who enabled our Baba Saheb to shine in the world and be such a powerful agent of transformation in our society. I want to remember Ayodhi Das, Ayyankali, Periyar, Pandita Ramabai, and also not forgetting Babu Jagjivan Ram, whose birth anniversary was on the 5th of April. We need to remember our elders because they have gone before us, and with honor and homage to their memory, I would like to go forward. We already know that Ambedkar taught that a society's progress is revealed by the status of the women in the society. So, and also we know that one of his biggest area is of contribution is in the area of law and of economics in our nation. And apart from being the architect of the constitution, he was also the one who set our economic structures in place. And being the law minister, the labor minister, and the law minister in the government both before and after independence, he was labor minister in pre-independence, and post-independence, he was a law minister. We know that he did many far-reaching, he took very far-reaching steps to improve the lives of the working classes, particularly the women. In my preparation, I have based my uh, preparation on two important essays. One is written by none other than Gauri Lankesh, who lost her life, who is a martyr to the cause of her outspoken journalism, and as a person who was strongly against the kind of violence that one sees, communal violence that one sees increasing in this country. I would like to honor her memory also by citing from her article very extensively in the earlier part of my writing. Then I would also be quoting from my own article entitled Enlightened Economics, which is available on the net at forwardpress.in. If you search for me for it by name Enlightened Economics and put my name, it will pop up. But in that, I am going to quote. It's a very large, it's a very extensive article. But I am going to quote Gail Ombet, who was one of the very important voices in promoting not just Ambedkar's thought, but also in upholding democratic values in our country, and a very sound academic also. So I quote Gauri Lankesh. She says, Indian feminists often limit Baba Saheb's work to the betterment of Dalit women's lives. This invisibilization of Ambedkar and his life's work is symptomatic of upper caste feminist movements. These are her words. I don't use the word upper caste in my work. I prefer to use the word dominant caste. Ambedkar is called upon only when these women speak to and of Dalit women, and beyond that, Baba Saheb's work has been pushed by the Indian feminists into the margins. However, Ambedkar's contribution is not an outlier to feminist struggles, but has in fact been strongly instrumental in shaping women's rights in this country. And as we know that, I will say a little more later, but we know that one of the strongest contributions to women's lives in our country by Ambedkar is his drafting of the Hindu Code Bill. It was so far ahead of its time that the cabinet at that time wouldn't pass it, and he resigned in protest. They kept postponing it. He hung on till it was going to be, hoping that it would be passed. But when he felt that it is not going to happen, he just resigned in protest. However, Pandit Nehru did get them passed, but not in, even he could not have possibly passed it in one go. He broke it up into 4 parts and gradually passed it. So that was the power of Baba Saheb's drafting and Baba Saheb's far-sighted thinking. And if at all women in India have rights to property and other legal citizenship rights, it is because of Baba Saheb's vision for equality for Indian women. And in his essay, but he was not only concerned with the material world. He was also Baba Saheb's very important contribution in public life and thought is his focus on not just the material but also the philosophical aspect of in India. He outlines how endogamy was the essence of the caste system. He details how the focus on maintaining caste exclusivity, that is caste, leads to the rise of sati and child marriage. That is, caste endogamy, needing to marry within the caste, is the prime reason why women's bodies are targeted at a very young age in the family, and it is a socially and religiously sanctioned exploitation. Excuse me. Ambedkar has always maintained that women were the gateways of the caste system, and the caste system laid down a structure for the subordination of women, and it had to be uprooted. It was this thinking that saw him work towards the Hindu Code Bill, of which a little more later. Ambedkar, in his other works, details the gendered violence that women face within the Hindu Smritis and Vedic texts. In the Manusmriti, for example, as he says, he sets the ideal to worship for women to worship the husband despite all flaws. And so it is this practice that is still expected of Indian women, and we still practice many of the principles that the Manusmriti laid down many centuries ago. For example, I just want to say that the patriarchal idea that the woman has to be under the control of the father in her young age, later on the husband, and later on her son. This is seriously followed even to this day, and to the extent that often mothers will refuse. The practice is that mothers will not stay in the daughter's house usually after, even if she's widowed. Because the patriarchal understanding is that the son is the one under whom she has to reside. So this is the practice to this day, and Ambedkar recognized this, over 100 years ago in his critique. And incidentally, this is the 131st year of Ambedkar's, birth. So it has been over 130 years since he was born and lived and worked among us. And I just want to say, imagine the vision of a man, as the poem, beautiful poem that was shared this morning. A body untouchable, but a soul so pure. And so and not only luminous, that it shines more brightly now than it did, when he was alive, in fact, I would say. And he did not only work for women's rights, he continually worked with all women, in fact, to realize the ambition of equality among the genders. He advocated for the rights of sex workers. He spoke out about the casteist nature of the foundation of sex work. Some of you who were aware of the nuances of the work among women in India, in the women's movement in India, will be aware that this issue continues to be quite controversial among the Indian feminist movement. And there are Dalit Bahujan women's movements which are strongly critical of the use of Dalit women's bodies or marginalized women's bodies in sex work, whereas women from privileged sections don't have to go into sex work to survive. It's a very controversial issue, but I will not go into it. Suffice it to say that he spoke about the casteism that was involved in the nature of sex work, and called it out very strongly. He worked strongly to protect women's rights under the labor laws. He was instrumental in reducing the number of working hours and improving working conditions. In 1928, as member of the Legislative Council of Bombay, he was of the view that if the employer was getting benefits of women's labor, they should also be supporting women at least partly when they are on maternity leave. He believed that another half should be paid by the government, as it was in the interest of the nation. Imagine this vision when, even in a country like the United States of America, even now, maternity leave is not enjoyed by the women working there. Believe me, that in 1928, almost 100 years ago, it was Ambedkar who was talking about maternity leave for women. In the 21st century, 2 decades after the 21st century, American women don't enjoy this benefit. That is how our Baba Saheb was. How much of a heart and a vision he had for women. He believed that women had the right over their own body. He said that conception was a choice that women should make. He argued for reproductive rights for women and recommended that birth control facilities should be made available to them, and was a strong advocate of women's reproductive freedom. People hadn't even heard about this term, hadn't imagined, but imagine that our Baba Saheb was talking about control over women's own bodies, about women's control over their own bodies in the about 100 years ago. This is our Baba Saheb. Our Indian women owe a lot to him, not just Dalits, not just women, but the whole country, in fact, owes a lot to him, because the timing, the work timings, earlier the working hour 9 to 5, which you take for granted, was actually advocated by Baba Saheb. Imagine, that was because he was aware of the nature of work being so strenuous, that people who work for 12 hours, that was a norm at that time. People had to work for 12 long hours, leaving no time for family values or interaction, or even for not even for enough time to rest and recoup for the next day's work. That is why he advocated an 8-hour working day. He drafted the Mines Maternity Benefit Act, which asked for equal wages and equal representation of women on the welfare fund for coal mine workers, and emphasized equal citizenship and women's rights to economic development as crucial for women's development in India. Between 42 and 46, he passed several progressive legislations for women that dealt with equal wages for equal work, casual and privileged leave, compensation in cases of injury, and pension. This was our Baba Saheb. And one of the biggest testaments to Ambedkar's feminism was the Hindu Code Bill. Ambedkar was entrusted with drafting it, and its intent was to codify property practices for men and women, design the law for maintenance, marriage, divorce, adoption, etc., among other issues. And Ambedkar used this as an opportunity to ensure that women had full access to rights within the system. He included the issue of abolition of birthright to property, property by survivorship, half share for daughters, conversion of women's limited estate into absolute estate, abolition of caste in matters of marriage and adoption, and the principle of monogamy and divorce. Ambedkar stood by these issues in face of strong opposition from conservative Hindu men in the parliament, and not only men but also women, because many of the women who were in parliament also opposed him strongly. They were not able to see they were not far-sighted enough to understand his vision. The focus of the bill was to give women absolute right over property, the absence of endogamy, that is, promoting of intercaste marriage rights. You know, this has now become very, very contentious issue at this point, and there are insidious ways in which people are trying to undermine women's right of choice of marital partner, even in this day. And let us not misunderstand, let us not be misled. What is said to be love jihad, what is called love jihad, is nothing but assertion of the Brahminical patriarchal understanding of controlling the sexuality of caste Hindu women. This is what is actually happening. So, and it was in anticipation perhaps of that he was talking about the absence of endogamy. When he was talking about reproductive rights, he was also talking about the freedom of choice to the woman to choose who she wants to marry and when she wants to marry. Access to divorce, and also to relieve women of the threat of polygamy. The aim was to oppose the practice of Brahminical patriarchy and thus arrest its reproduction, the reproduction of Brahminical patriarchal values in the society. The bill kept getting tabled in the parliament with promises to address it at a later point in time, but this never happened. The House was well aware of the power of disruption that the bill possessed. The men there were very, very aware, acutely aware. It had the potential to shake the foundations of patriarchal control over production and reproduction, property, because it also dealt with property. In despair, Ambedkar resigned. In his resignation speech, Ambedkar said, "The Hindu Code Bill was the greatest social reform measure ever undertaken by the legislator in this country. No law passed by the Indian legislature in the past or likely to be passed in the future can be compared to it in points of its significance. To leave inequality between class and caste, between sex and sex, which is the soul of Hindu society, untouched, and to go on passing legislation relating to economic problems is to make a farce of our constitution and to build a palace on a dung heap." That important phrase, of building a palace on a dung heap, was said in this context. This is the significance I attach to the Hindu code. It is for this sake that I stayed on, notwithstanding my differences. This was his, I'm quoting from the last speech of Ambedkar as he resigned and left the parliament. But it was not only at that point, but right from the beginning of his public life that one saw how he foregrounded the issues of women, addressed them directly, spoke to them, encouraged them, inspired them. And you see, if you look at the Mahad Satyagraha, 10,000 men and women walked together to break the law not allowing Mahars to drink water from the tank. This was in contrast to, this is what Gauri Lankesh says. She contrasts this in contrast with Gandhi's salt satyagraha, during which there were no women which were allowed to participate. Women were not allowed to participate in the famous salt satyagraha of Gandhi. In the Kalaram temple entry movement, Ambedkar inspired women to come out of their social arenas and speak with courage. In 1930, mind you, 15,000 people came out to be part of this movement. Radhabai Vadale, who was one of the women who was moved by Baba Saheb's call, said, "It is better to die 100 times than live a life of humiliation." This is a testament to the fact that Ambedkar had inspired confidence in women to fight for their rights. This was our Baba Saheb. He organized the Depressed Classes Women's Conference. Imagine this. In the early 20th century, no other group, even the Congress, Indian National Congress, which existed at that time, did not do this. But he had a women's conference. In an address to the All India, and he speaks to them, All India Depressed Classes Conference. That too, depressed classes, not women from the privileged classes. It was depressed class women he had organized and mobilized. He says, "Give education to your children, instill ambition in them. Don't be in a hurry to marry. Marriage is a liability. You should not impose upon children unless financially they are able to meet the liabilities arising from them. Above all, let each girl who marries stand up to her husband." She should stand up to her husband. She should not get subjugated. She should stand up. Claim to be her husband's friend and equal. This was our Baba Saheb's words. And refuse to be his slave. What are we doing to girls in the 21st century now? We are bringing them up to be very good Bharatiya Naris who will come willingly subjugate themselves, bend their neck, touch their feet, wash the, do the drudgery relating to domestic work without any question, but not our Baba Saheb. Our Baba Saheb saw and lived. His philosophy was truly organic because it was based on not only material realities, but was strongly based on the principle of equality. It was a principled equality. Now, it was telling of Ambedkar's feminism and his push to ensure that women were not enslaved to the patriarchal ideas as mapped in the Hindu religion. This is what he has clearly spelled out. He rallied for the rights to equal partnership in marriage well before feminists. It was the first person to talk about equal rights in marriage was Ambedkar, even before the Indian feminist movement started talking about it. In his he was, as we know, he was also a pioneer journalist. He started a newspaper called Muknayak in January 1920, and later on a bi-weekly called Bahishkrut Bharat in 27, and wrote a lot, covered a lot of issues relating to women in their rights in his publications. In this, I am very much inspired by as a journalist by Baba Saheb's work. Not only Baba Saheb, but so many other pioneering social change agents existed who were active in bringing about positive social change through their journalism. And anyone who's involved, anyone in this group who are also involved in writing on social issues should realize that they have, they're following a great path. Great people have walked before them, and we should strive to live up to those ideals. And then he was talking about addressing another group of Dalit women. He said, what is the difference between children born to caste women from the upper caste or dominant caste, and us? What are the difference between their children and our children? You must realize that there is no difference. They are as pure and as capable as ours, and vice versa. Why should your children, therefore, suffer any kind of injustice or insult? This came from his own experience, because as you remember, his family was not exactly poor or less developed. His mother's family had several officers in the British Army. His father himself was well placed in society. They were not typically poor, but he was discriminated against in his throughout his life because of his caste. Even when he became a foreign returned qualified person and was under the employ of the Maharaja of Baroda, he had no place to stay because the caste society would not permit him a place to stay. In this context, he says, why should your children be insulted? He's not talking about himself. He's talking about the children of the Dalit women. If you have not thought about this, if you had thought about it, you would have struggled about it yourselves. Therefore, it is not enough to just think that he had a hand as an economist. Okay, let me just in closing say a little bit about, as I promised earlier, say a little bit about what Gail Omet had to say about his statecraft or his understanding. Actually, he in my article that I referred to, Enlightened Economics, I have summarized that as I quoted a famous Professor Ambirajan, and he talks about when he was the one. If you please recall this, he was not only the one who initiated the Reserve Bank of India, he also initiated the Controller and Auditor General, the CAG, which is such an important body in our country at this time. He stated that government should spread the resources garnered from the public, not only as per rules, laws, and regulations, but also see that faithfulness, wisdom, and economy have gone into the acts of expenditure by public authorities. I am quoting from an article here. First, the question of faithfulness. In this context, it is defined by the dictionary as duty or commitment to fulfill a trust or a promise. Therefore, whether fiscal or monetary economic theory, his primary interest was to ensure a practical outcome that would be pro-people in its impact. Public finance exists so that basic requirements such as roads, law and order, etc. are to be available to all and not enjoyed exclusively. As the costs and benefits of such items cannot be internalized, they will not be supplied, please note, underscore, they will not be supplied through the free market mechanism. Governments exist to provide these common requirements. The citizens place their trust in the government by delegating to it the authority to take decisions on taxation and expenditure. Therefore, the fidelity to the original intention must be tempered by wisdom on the part of the government officials who take the decisions. And they must be undertaken with prudence, with an understanding of deeper issues, application of critical knowledge, and practical experience. And finally, the third principle of economy, pertaining not only to keeping costs to a minimum, but the intelligent use of funds so that every rupee is fully and gainfully used, making sure that leakages do not occur. These three principles are not only axiomatic but also flexible. What may be prudent at one time may be foolish under other circumstances. They apply to all establishments, small or big. So this is his understanding. So he says his up to date, critical, and in depth knowledge of economics, history, and philosophy, though evident, is in his writings. It also is evident that he is practical, rational, and scientific in his approach, and uses data and statistical analysis to arrive at his decision making processes. Then he says that in Ambirajan, Professor Ambirajan, he quotes, he says Ambedkar's critique of the caste system, is not only based on principles of economic efficiency. He also shifted gradually based on. Remember, Ambedkar lived through the most tumultuous times. During his lifetime, he saw the two world wars, he saw the Nazi Holocaust, and he saw the partition of India. He lived through probably two famines, and so therefore he had a very, very sound grasp of how pandemic type situations impact the lives of the poor. We would really appreciate and benefit from studying his approach to the utilization of funds in such contexts. Therefore, his position moved towards from being inspired by mainstream economic thought. He begins to come closer to system of state socialism towards the end of his life, featuring state ownership of agriculture along with collectives of cultivators, state ownership of industry, nationalization of insurance, etc. And so you can contrast that approach with what is happening in the present day, where there seems to be a reversal of these norms, weakening of like CAG and related regulatory bodies' powers, and also privatization of public assets such as PSUs and the railways. So there is perhaps a need for us to relook at Ambedkar's approach, using his pragmatism as well as his compassion in dealing with such major issues. And he, in a lecture entitled Liberty, Equality, Community, Baba Saheb's Vision of a New Social Order, Gail Ombet made this lecture, and in that she talks about three main points with regard to the Ambedkarite vision for India. There was a modern belief in progress and human development. Then, while he shared a belief in progress with Marx, but differed from him in interpretation of the motive force of human history. Marx, as you know, was a materialist, whereas in contrast with and of course also there was a very nuanced difference with Nehruvian statism. Ambedkar's economic and political philosophy, please note, was a form of social liberalism. One sec. And one moment. I lost my net. And we really need to remember that in his essay, Buddha versus Karl Marx, he writes very clearly that he sees in Marx a kind of precursor to the social change, but he actually harks back to the Buddhist Sangha, and he says that will be the ideal in which we will work to bring about social change. So the main divisions he sees, that is that the government in this, during Buddha's time there was a king, then there was a Sangha, which is the people, and so the king and the people in a republican sense work together, and then there is also the Buddhist group who are the householders and the Buddhist Sangha. So there is a dialectic between the government, the Sangha, and the people, the common people, the producers. So in a sense, he anticipates the state, the division of the church and the state that happened during the time of the economics, the enlightenment, that whole debate that was sparked due to the overlap between church and state in Europe. And the Enlightenment, as you know, was an effort to separate the two. And here he talks about, in a very Indian context, a nuanced way, he talks about how there are three different points in the society which bring them together and work together in that sense. So with these words, I would like to, pay homage to our Baba Saheb on his 131st birth anniversary, and thank you all for your kind attention and patience in listening to me. I have slightly exceeded my time. Thank you so much. I hand it back to the moderator.
Thank you for your time and this informative and intriguing presentation, ma'am. As you rightly said, our Baba Saheb definitely encouraged women and instilled a fight and ambition in them. Further, I would like to request Mr. Vedant Mayankar to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Prerna. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, MNLU Mumbai, Professor Dr. Dilip Uke, Sir, our esteemed Registrar, Sir, Dr. Anil Varyat, and our today's chief guest, Ms. Cynthia Stephen, ma'am, our faculty members, non-faculty members, and all galaxy of intellectual participants who have joined today's virtual meeting, or we can say a tribute, on the topic Unspoken Side of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in Women Empowerment. With enthusiasm and interactive spirit, a very good evening, a very good morning to one and all. I deem it my proud privilege to present a vote of thanks on behalf of MNLU Mumbai. I extend my warm gratitude to Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Honorable Registrar, Sir, Coordinator, Ma'am, Shraddha Gaikwad, Ma'am, Joint Coordinator, Shriya Mukta, Ma'am, and today's moderator, Prerna Sanjay, for moderating this entire program very lucidly. All our participants who have enthusiastically joined for today's discussion. The entire intent of today's program was to remember Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's legacy in women empowerment in the field. And as the title suggests, the unspoken side of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Usually, as Shraddha ma'am also said, Shraddha ma'am is a sociology teacher in our university. So as she said that we confine Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as a Dalit leader or as a leader of some community. But he was much greater than that. He was a great economist. Many of us may not know that he was the one who conceptualized the idea of the Reserve Bank of India and the entire functioning of it in his thesis, The Problem of Economy, in his book. He was a great foreign policy maker. During the Indo-China War, he suggested various foreign policies to Jawaharlal Nehru, the then Prime Minister. He was a great sociologist, anthropologist, historian, a political scientist, constitutional law expert, lawyer, an eminent jurist, and whatnot. But unfortunately, we confine Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as a leader of one community. And just to break those stereotypes, break those obstacles, and remember his unspoken work. As Cynthia ma'am said, that as a labor minister, his bills, that is women maternity leave, the labor bill, and the working hours, which she mentioned, the women's right to divorce, which was granted by Dr. Staunchly, was supporting that our women should have the right to divorce. And of course, ma'am, as you pointed out, that in the Constituent Assembly, the women itself were not very sure about this Hindu Code bill. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was far in future, much beyond 21st century, I should say, because some of his thoughts still we may not accept, but he was a futuristic person. And that's why the entire purpose, what he did for women empowerment, all his bills, as firstly from starting from the maternity leave, as you said, in US it's still not there, but in 1928 back, our great Dr. B.R. Ambedkar presented this as in Bombay Legislative Assembly, if I'm not wrong, this bill. And the great Hindu Code bill, which was one of his most magnificent work for the women empowerment. And as you also stated, that this is the most important work ever being done in this parliament than any other. So, ma'am, thank you very much for enlightening us on this unspoken side of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And our audience have come to know various things. And today, while celebrating the birth anniversary of this great eminent jurist, erudite scholar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, we also encourage all the students, participants, members, and everyone to at least read upon this unspoken side of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as a feminist, as a gender justice person, his work in gender justice field. And you can also enlighten us, you can approach us, you can email to us your findings. Let's make this Ambedkar Jayanti and remember Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's true legacy. And let's, of course, at the last, educate, unite, and fight for rights. Thank you very much.